Thank you for watching the World Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook with your hosts Edward McQueen and April Garner.
Oh, good. Good evening. Good evening. We are live and we're going to talk about being alive today. I'm your host, Ed McQueen. Good evening to the World Community Magazine live. And of course, co-host, none other than Miss April Garner. All right. See that hand, Miss April. So again, good evening to everyone. And we're glad you joined us today. And you know, every week we try to come with some very, very helpful information regarding our well-being, and this time it's regarding our health, your well-being on your health. And we want to talk, if you've seen the promo, whether you've been a victim or not, you or anybody in your family, we're talking about this issue or this disease called sickle cell disease. And April, we're going to start tonight with a trio that has new approaches to sickle cell. We used to think that sickle cell was cured some time ago, but it was not. It was just laying dormant. I understand, but our guest will be here to tell us all about that. And so, what can we bring him up? Let's do it. Right, and we're gonna get right into this discussion. I'm anxious because my understanding is you all have a wealth of information that's going to be very helpful to our audience. I know it's especially me since my family, we've had a victim of sickle cell in our family. My sister, some 30-some years ago. So, good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
And we're so happy to have you and for you all to bring about your new approaches, as he says the way that we send out the information, the new approaches to dealing with sickle cell, including wellness of sickle cell. So we'll go clockwise, and we'll start with our first guest, Miss Adrienne Shapiro, and we're going around. So Ms. Shapiro, we'll let you give us a brief bio of yourself, if you would kindly do that. We appreciate that.
Well, first, I want to thank you. I mean, as you'll see, the three of us are always thrilled and so appreciative of people who are willing to help us spread more and more information on what's happening with the sickle cell community. So thank you for having us. So I'm Adrienne Shapiro. I'm fifth generation of mothers in my family to have a child with sickle cell, and I am the sister, like you. Of what we call a weaned warrior, my eldest brother, Teddy, who passed away from sickle cell, but at the ripe old age of 51. So we thought in my family that, you know, my mom would be the last generation of mothers to have a child with sickle cell. And because we were all tested for the trait, and I had a false negative, and my first child was born with sickle cell disease. And so that's what really brings me here to the sickle cell community.
Wow. We're certainly going to come back during our discussion, come back and you can tell us a bit more about that. So we just go around to Ms. Powell, who's our first contact about having everybody on this program. And she was just a delightful person to talk to, April, sharing a lot of information. So we thought it would be very wise to have her and her colleagues to share information on sickle cell. So Ms. Powell, is on you.
Okay, I'm Shirley Powell. I am a sickle cell warrior. I have sickle cell disease, and I have survived and thrived for 66 years with the disease. I am as Adrienne mentioned, we refer to ourselves as warriors.
Right.
We take on the challenge with dedication, with power and commitment, with hope.
Right.
I am a certified nutritional consultant, a naturopathic doctor, and I am a resident holistic health consultant for Cayenne Wellness, who supports the sickle cell community, particularly in California, but throughout the world. I'm
Okay.
currently a resident of Southern California.
Wow. All right. Well, again, we're going to come back to you too, because according to your bio, you got a bit to talk about too. And now we get on to Miss Corley. She's a registered nurse, and you know we got to talk some about you.
So thanks for inviting us. It's a pleasure to be here, and hopefully we can shed some light that enlightens people about sickle cell disease. So I'm actually a retired nurse. Who they laugh when I say that, because I left the institution. I worked for University of Southern California as their nurse coordinator for sickle cell disease. And I left that organization after working for them for 30 years to go out into the community to actually have a different platform where I wasn't, the things I wanted to say, I couldn't say. When you're in an institution, you have to be careful, the things that you say. But once you leave that building, you're able to then confront some of the injustices that live in the sickle cell community. And so I left in order to come forward and actually partner with people living with sickle cell disease to make a difference in the world, and how they're treated and how they're viewed.
Wow. Well, hopefully you all's partnership will be very enlightening today. And so I'm going to start with my question. So what you said, all of you said that the catalyst for really being passionate about this, two of you at least were victims, okay, and of the disease. So
Warrior.
yeah, okay, warriors, okay, and that's great. That's a good word for it, okay. That's a good word, right? I'm glad we can laugh about it too. I really am.
So I actually have no known relatives to me who have sickle cell disease, but we all know that sickle cell disease is a condition that people don't speak about openly.
Right.
And so you really don't know who resides in your family who might have sickle cell disease.
Right.
And so I can say that when I came into sickle cell disease, I knew very little about it. I actually was decided as an African-American young person that I wanted to do something in my community. And so I volunteered at a sickle cell camp for children with sickle cell disease, because I knew that it was a disease that disproportionately affected people of color.
Right.
And after getting there, it was amazing. When I took the job as the nurse for the sickle cell center, there were many classmates of mine who had sickle cell disease who I had no idea had sickle cell disease. And I can remember telling one young man who's no longer with us, I said to him, I just used to think you were lazy and trifling and didn't want to come to school. The reality of sickle cell disease is that people just don't know what they don't know.
Okay. So while we're talking with you, Ms. Corley, I see that you were you worked on a project called Unveil Sickle Cell.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So that's actually a project that I created.
Okay.
And I just felt like there's such a misconception about what sickle cell disease is and where it resides. And so many people in our communities, they don't realize they carry even the trait for sickle hemoglobin. And so now, fortunately, across the country and every state, babies are screened with newborn screening at the time of birth, and they're identified to have whatever genetic type they have. And so at the time that I came about, they were just really starting newborn screening. But we now do newborn screening on all children, just like we do newborn screening for other genetic conditions at the time of birth. We do that. Unfortunately, the information does not get out into the community as it needs to get out, because even with screening, there oftentimes, that you screen and then you get the results and then you try to find the person so you can give them the results. And oftentimes that's not a possibility. And so there's a big void in how we can really ensure that everybody knows their hemoglobin status. And so we are now we're starting a movement to ensure that children in school know what their hemoglobin type is. I mean, on your records in school, they have everything else on there. Why wouldn't they have your hemoglobin type?
Right.
So we're just trying to decrease the number of babies born with sickle cell disease by informing the public about the possibilities.
Wow. So Ms. Powell, we talked a bit just before the show. And you I believe it was you who mentioned that there were different types of sickle cell. I'd never known that.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was Adrienne Shapiro, I think, and Pat who mentioned that there were. I actually didn't know it until maybe within the last 10 years, because well, that's a long story, but there are several variants of the disorder. And of course, it's something that you're born with. It's something that's usually, people think it's only a Black disease, but actually, we just had a conference where we had a Caucasian woman from the Netherlands who has sickle cell disease.
Wow.
So it actually has more to do with where you were born, or your ancestors were born in areas where malaria was prevalent. So there are, I think the last statistic I saw is actually 1/3 of sickle cell population resides in India. Africa itself, the continent, is a large base of people with sickle cell disease, but also Greece, Southern Italy, Latin American countries. So it's not so much your ethnicity as it is to do with where your roots are from globally. I actually got sidetracked from the question.
That's right. It's okay. Well, you started mentioning where the roots are from. Now, I read something that during slavery, sickle cell, which I thought originated in Africa, but it was used over here a lot with the slaves who had sickle cell, because that warded off of malaria. Does that still stand? Does that fact still?
So the reality actually is, in those regions where there was a high incidence of malaria, there was a mutation that took place. So those individuals who wound up as a result of that mutation having a gene for sickle hemoglobin, and having sickle cell trait, lived through the malaria epidemic, as opposed to those people with normal hemoglobin, are those people who tended to have SS as a result of being babies born by people with a gene for sickle hemoglobin each. But there are, in those regions, there are other abnormal hemoglobins. And the way they were able to determine that was that they looked at the map for malaria and they looked at the map for the occurrence of the sickle gene and other abnormal hemoglobins, and they were able to positively prove that it was a selective mutation that took place to protect people against malaria.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I appreciate that information. And so
You asked what the various disease variants were, and the most common would be SS, HBSS. There's HBSC, HBS beta thalassemia, HBSD, HBSE, SO, and a whole bunch more. But those are the more common variations of sickle cell disease.
And that's primarily in the U.S. because
Right.
in Africa, the C gene, sickle C disease is more prevalent. And in Saudi Arabia and other things, there's another abnormal gene. So we see sickle cell all over the globe, you know, and like I said, when we were talking earlier, there are hundreds of different types of abnormal hemoglobin. And anytime you couple one abnormal hemoglobin with a gene for sickle hemoglobin, you get a form of sickle cell disease. So there are many, many different forms of sickle cell disease. We just most frequently see the type that Shirley is talking about in the US. However, all over the world, there's a lot of sickle cell disease.
wow.
And I think that the SS is the one that we see highlighted most of the time here in the US because it's the one that presents with the most, I think, amount of physical pain and actual sickling. So, and I don't know whether it's the most common here in the States or not, but I do know that that's generally what people think of. Whenever you see someone presented in a talk or in a movie script or something like that, they're generally represented by an SS patient.
And,
So-
and actually, two people can have the same variant. I have SE, but it shows up almost as severe as SS, or it
Right.
has. So it varies greatly from person to
Right.
person, even if they have the same variant.
So Ms. Powell, it was likely that both of your parents had the gene, right?
They both have the
They
trait.
both had the gene.
Yeah. And
And
so if both parents have the
gene.
They both had trait, but they had different traits.
Right.
right.
She had one parent with the C gene,
Right.
And one
coupled
parent
with a normal gene for A, and one parent with a S gene coupled with a normal gene for A.
Right. And I had a normal and a sickle, and my daughter's father had a normal and an S gene sickle. And so our daughter was born with SS.
So anyone can address this. What do you think? April, you can jump in at any time, okay? So what kind of advances do you think have occurred to offer longevity to sickle cell people who are born with sickle cell? And I'm asking that because my sister, when she passed from it, she was like just 33, and they kind of like predicted that age. Okay, it wasn't talked about a lot, but the experts, so-called experts, the medical experts were predicting that. So now you have people, 50s, 60s, like yourself, Ms. Powell.
80s.
60s.
80s and 90s even.
Yeah.
And so, and congratulations to you. I'm so thankful to see you. Yeah. So what kind of advances or research that has resulted in some of the advances for increasing longevity? What do you think?
Well, I think starting off, I'm going to pass this on to Pat and Adrienne because they're really experts in that area. But I will say that it started off with just screening and then doing prophylactic care through antibiotics.
Okay.
And that definitely was the launching pad for a life extension. When I was born, they didn't think I was going to live past my teens. So a lot has happened over the years. The first drug that they had, the first drug therapy for sickle cell was hydroxyurea, and that was at least 20 years ago. And they just have begun to flood the sickle cell community with new drug and gene therapies and stem cell therapies. And Adrienne and Pat can speak to that.
Yeah, well, speaking of, I know you all going to speak to, but speaking of stem cells before I leave it, I noticed that from Ms. Shapiro, that you were a stem cell activist, and that was relative to sickle cell. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, as Shirley mentioned, when my brother was born, my mom was told that he would not live basically to be a teenager. And when my daughter was born, I didn't get any number. I didn't get a number. And we got really excellent care because we had trained physicians, amazing physicians, who were really very much dedicated to treatment of children with sickle cell disease. And so my daughter thrived. She did have, crisis, and she was in the hospital, but she'd go out. It was pretty predictable. And as far as her health pattern, right? Again, all of these are individual, like all our genes are individual, so our journeys can be individualized. And so we had at one point we had we had treatments that came for the kids. So it was folic acid. What was the other one? Not the amino acid, the other A. Folic acid. I'm sorry. Penicillin, hydration, pain management, which was really a big advance.
Yeah.
There were types of health screenings that my brother didn't have that my daughter had. There were advances of understanding things like what happens with the gallbladder and other various organs that were damaged. Blood transfusion, and there was a lot more work put in being able to match blood correctly. So the children grew into teenagers and young adults. We also did, I think, in the early, like in the 200 year, 2000. We were making advances in bone marrow transplants, right? So they discovered by accident that you could correct a person's sickle gene by doing a bone marrow transplant with them for someone who did not have sickle, right? And so that became part of the standardized treatment. The problem was, well, there was a couple of problems, but the major problem was those of us African Americans, it's very, very hard because of our genetic makeup to find an exact match, even in our own family. So at that point, it was quoted 1 in 10, meaning same mother, same father, 10 children, right? And you might be able to find a genetic match for the child that has sickle cell. Well, anybody that has one kid with sickle cell would not likely, have 10. So finding a match was very, very difficult. And so in 2007, in the state of California, we started doing clinical studies and things on using stem cell research, which is where you take a cell and you basically kind of regress it back to its original state, and then you launch it, for lack of a better word, into whatever type of tissue you need. So it could be a nerve, it could be organ, it can be blood, it could be any of those types of states. And so that meant that you could use your own blood tissue, your own tissue, your own stem cells to create your treatment, which alleviated the idea of having to find a match, and also really got rid of the idea that you could have a mismatch in any way, which would then cause you to have other complications. And so California really led a lot of that work. It established the California Institute for Regenerative Medicine, and they they financed several studies, and one of the largest studies ever done for sickle cell was the one that they did for sickle cell through UCLA. So they did a study at UCLA, one at Stanford, and now one at UCFS, UCLA, USC, and I'm forgetting somebody. I'll remember. So they were really, really put into, the state of California put millions and millions of dollars into these studies to see if they could get it to work. And there were two ways. One would be you would harvest the stem cells and you would put it in a solution, and that solution, for lack of a better word, would change the actual cell type, stem cell type, so that it would make, instead of sickled cells, it would make adult normal cells, right? And they would put it, basically harvest it from your body, treat it, and then put it back in the body. The other one now they're really getting a lot of attention is what we call editing. So it would actually take the person's own tissue, stem cells, and re-edit the DNA so that it would either now, instead of producing an S, it would have it up in A, right? And so all the blood cells regenerated from that point on, from the surgery on, would then make A. The other thing is to sort of cut part of the DNA out and then have it so that it would do something different. For example, one would have you only make you'd have adult cells and fetal blood cells, which are the same ones we get when we're in utero, and you have protections. And so once really the universities and California put in a lot of money, corporate people started thinking, oh, well, this might be something really good for us. And so they got into looking at sickle cell. And one reason is that it's a single gene and it's in blood, which is just one function. So it made it like an opportune disease and situation to study, which once they can fix this, then there are other things that they can do for it. So, but it was as if they started really pouring lots of dollars into it, right? And we started getting a lot of attention that, how can I put it? That brought about this re-education, right? And this reintroduction to sickle cell, because many people thought sickle cell was only a childhood disease. And if your kid lived past the age of 18, basically they were going to go on and have this life that was unencumbered. The other thing was much of funding went into AIDS and went into cancer. And so these other types of diseases weren't getting any attention. And it kind of was a double-edged sword for us. We didn't get any attention, but the fact that they poured so much money into AIDS and cancer, they made all of these advances. And all of those advances are really what set the stage for us to make such accelerated progress in treating sickle cell, which is nobody thought that in a matter of less than 20 years that we would be where we are. We have 3 new treatments that are disease modifying. They finally got away from only wanting to stop the pain, which everybody was told you have to stop the pain, really, really looking at the disease. And so we have 3 new treatments that are through the FDA approved, and we're using those now. And we have, like I said earlier, we expect to go through the FDA for the cure, for one of the stem cell cures. Actually, it's going to go before the FDA in November, the first one. And then we expect a second one early next year.
So I see you use the word cure.
Well, so there's a lot of discussion that goes on with cure. So to me, and I think it basically stops the mechanism of the sickling so that your body doesn't experience any more of that type of sickling and crippling disease. It cannot regenerate tissue and undo damage that's already been done to the body. And one of the things people don't understand about sickle cell is that it's not just a matter of your cells sickling as it's going through your veins. It's a matter of it sickling and I want to say clotting up the arteries and capillaries and causes damage to all the major organs in the body. So this cure doesn't fix any of that, right? What this cure does is it stops the mechanism for causing all of that damage. And so some people don't think of it as a cure. I happen to, but it's personal. I happen to think of it as being a curative because it stops that mechanism. And I think of the other things as being regenerative, meaning the regeneration, getting away of damage. Pat has.
So it will be helpful to those who are able to get it. It will not be available to everyone. The people who have major organ damage would not be candidate for having that. So again, there's no universal cure for sickle cell disease. There certainly are things that have happened over the years to bring us to a better place. When I first started out, all we could do is hold patients' hands, give them a little pain medicine, and hope that they could get through the painful episodes they have. If you can imagine, I don't know if you've ever slammed your hand on a car door or a window or a door. And if you can remember that pain that you had in just that area, if you magnify that pain by 100 times, and that pain is not just in one area, but it can be all over your body at the same time. And there can be no way of getting any relief at times. Unfortunately, our biggest complaint from patients is poor pain management with the disease that they were born into. And we absolutely know that it's a disease that causes people to experience pain. However, there is so much, particularly because of the opioid epidemic, there is a graduation in the amount of struggle they have to actually even get medicated when they come into the emergency rooms in pain or when they're admitted to the hospital. So sickle cell disease, I mean, it's a bad enough disease to be born with sickle cell disease.
So morphine, you can't even use morphine. That doesn't do any good.
So the morphine helps some patients. Other opioids like Dilaudid or something help other patients. But the problem is getting doctors and healthcare providers to believe that you're in pain and to administer the pain medicine in a way that you actually silence the pain. You don't, the mechanism that's causing the pain doesn't go away, but you temporarily silence what you're feeling by the use of opioids. But we fight every day for patients because doctors and nurses and people in the healthcare field don't believe. You know what? The opioid epidemic is actually not an epidemic that was born in our community, you know, but we suffer because all the pictures you see on television, a lot of times are African Americans who have drug problems. And so it's a continual fight to get patients living with sickle cell disease, warriors, what they need in order to live a productive life. I think people die a lot of times because they just get tired of suffering.
When we come back from the break, I'd like to share more about the racism and emergency room issues.
Okay. Glad you're aware of the break. So we'll be right back.
This is Jerome McQueen of Academics, the national movement to encourage our young people to choose STEM as career aspiration.
I had a really great biology teacher. She was like nationally recognized. She got to meet President Obama.
this year I'm working with 3D printing, actually being able to use my skills from A&T to design things on the computer and actually see them become a physical part.
I think we're back. Thanks. Wow. You're on mute, April, so.
Thank you. I've been on mute for so long, I forgot I was on mute. This has been a very intriguing 45 minutes of information about sickle cell disease, and our guests have covered a lot of ground. Everything from the disease in its various forms, the traits, the drug therapies, the stem cell cures, the different types of therapies, and they've even gone into more information about the clinical trials and pain management, a number of things. And we still have yet a lot of ground to cover. I know that our guests are poised tonight to talk about beneficial diet and lifestyle tools. And as we were going into the break, what was introduced into the conversation was information about what appears to be some discrimination and disparities when it comes down to providing care, especially emergent care, for people of color. And so we're going to get back into that as we go back into the discussion, and also talk more about the advocacy, the legislation, and the support systems that are out there, because it sounds like people who are dealing with sickle cell really do need a lot of support in terms of getting the help they need, especially if they may not be eligible for certain types of therapy. So if you're ready, I'll bring the guests back on, and then you can continue the conversation.
Let's do it.
All right. So Ms. Pat, Ms. Shirley, and Adrienne, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, before we left, I think Ms. Powell was going to talk about racism and how it's impacted sickle cell research, or how we're dealing with sickle cell.
Yeah, racism is a real problem because for sickle cell warriors, because when we go to the emergency room, more often than not, the vast majority of us, I don't know if there are any exceptions, need high doses of opiates to control this kind of pain. And that is there's so much stigma attached to that. And so we're often seen as drug seekers. And the opioid epidemic, as Pat mentioned, really has been a major thorn in the side to add more suffering and unnecessary difficulties. I personally have experienced that many times, even twice this year. I've been turned away from emergency rooms. I've been given, I've I've been given something for diarrhea, for constipation when I had pain episodes in my abdominal area. Uh, in July of this year, I broke my wrist, and trauma will often throw you into a pain episode. And so I had the broken wrist plus a crisis, and I had a very disrespectful emergency room doctor where I filed a complaint with the Joint Commission, the health department, and the hospital itself because he refused to give me or even listen to me and screaming in my face and all kinds of manner of disrespect. I so that's not unique and it's not unusual. It's not rare. It's something that we are facing. We're trying to raise awareness in those areas. We actually have some legislative bills before Congress now um, to help bring more attention to the sickle cell community, raise awareness, and get better health care overall. I'll stop there, and hopefully before we close our session, I can share some of the things that as a naturopath have been tremendously beneficial for me as a warrior over the course of my life. It has changed the quality of my life tremendously. So there are things that we can do with diet and lifestyle, taking a holistic approach to care, to self-care, that can make a tremendous difference.
I see you mentioned diet and lifestyle. I see that you're also the author of the book Making Friends with Food.
Right.
So could you elaborate a little bit? I kind of have an idea, but just take us through it.
Well, food, the way God originally designed it, is our friend. Processed foods with additives, with chemicals, artificial coloring, artificial flavoring, highly processed food is our enemy. And there are probably hundreds and hundreds of foods in the grocery store today, quote foods, that weren't on the shelves, 50, 100 years ago, that were unheard of, unknown. So I call them frankenfood. There are, so the basic principle in the book provides an understanding of how the body works and how it responds to food. And I make an analogy with, say, fuel for your vehicle. So you wouldn't put diesel fuel in a car that requires unleaded because it's going to blow the engine. And so it's the same for my body with sickle cell and anybody else's body, really. The book really is applicable to anyone who wants optimal health. And so it's from a holistic perspective, also talking about the value of sunshine, as brown and black people need more sun than Caucasians. So for vitamin D, for mental, emotional grounding and health, it has tremendous benefits. It talks about the oxygen and how we actually don't breathe correctly. And it talks about belly breathing. It talks about the necessity for proper sleep because our bodies are like a car or factory being overhauled. You shut down things during sleep, major healing occurs, especially between the hours of 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. Huge overhauling, cleansing, repairing, eliminating major activity. And it's not that our bodies aren't doing that around the clock, but that's some intense activities during those hours. It also includes some recipes, but basically it gives a description of the nutrients the body needs and what foods provide them. And when I changed my diet and lifestyle, 33 years ago, I actually didn't have any more pain episodes for 27 years. I also had eczema, hypothyroidism, irritable bowel syndrome, chronic urinary tract infections, chronic upper respiratory infections, and those all disappeared within 6 months and they haven't returned. The only thing remaining is a sickle cell. And
As a result of the diet.
yeah, the diet and lifestyle only. Um, I didn't even take supplements at that time. I do now. Um, but because a lot of times, especially as our soils are depleted from nutrients, and also because the demand for nutrients is much higher in sickle cell, I do take supplements now. But there are some foods that are specifically beneficial for sickle cell, like ginger, turmeric. Those are vasodilators. But the beauty of whole foods is they have multiple benefits as opposed to prescription medication. They might help alleviate symptoms, but they usually don't cure anything. But food like ginger is anti-inflammatory. It's a vasodilator. It's good for gastrointestinal health. It is antioxidants and on and on. So whole foods, natural foods, basically eat the rainbow. All colors, they all have different healing and health renewing and restorative properties. The body detoxifies itself, and eating whole foods uh, helps that process. With sickle cell, it's important to drink enough fluids. Alcohol and cigarettes are enemies of the body, especially
Always.
sickle cell.
Always.
Yeah, but they are in sodas. So there are a lot of things that are toxic. So if we just look at what comes out of the ground and off trees, uh, I don't eat meat personally, but I do eat salmon, which is a flesh food. You can call that a meat. I just, started eating that again. But basically, just trying to eat as pure whole food as possible can make a major difference in whatever condition you have, but especially with sickle cell.
One comment from one of our loyal viewers, Ms. Margie McIver. She asked you to touch upon exercise and what benefits can come from that as well.
Exercise is huge for all people. It's exercise also it does so many things. It improves circulation. It helps alleviate inflammation. It improves gastrointestinal health. It improves the mood and brain function because it increases circulation. It increases oxygenation, and oxygen is the breath of life for especially. That's a huge issue with sickle cell. Sickle cell, people with sickle cell have to be particularly careful about exercise because I have put myself into a pain episode by overexertion. And so you have to really pay attention and know your body and not think, oh, I'll get by, I'll get through this. You have to be true and just own up to where you are. But exercise can actually help reduce uh, sickling and increase the quality of life. But you have to kind of do it in moderation if you have sickle cell because the capacity for oxygenation is limited because of the fact that red blood cells don't have the normal 120-day life cycle when you're a sickle cell warrior. It could be 1/10 of that. And so you don't have the capacity to answer the demand of strenuous exercise. And they've even found people with sickle cell trait, when they engage in extreme exercise, can actually have pain episodes or even death. But exercise overall, you just do I exercise, I walk in the sun, I do what's called forest bathing. Fortunately, I live close to the Arboretum here where there's a jungle part that actually where they filmed uh, Fantasy Island and Tarzan and things like that. So it's just really grounding and enhances your the quality of the air and so on. But exercise is really, really important. Doing some resistance to your capacity, doing stretching, doing breath work, and we actually have weekly Sunday breath work for sickle cell warriors online. So it's amazing in terms of how much of a difference it can make in the quality of your life. It can turn around diabetes because it takes the sugar out of the blood and puts it in the muscles so they can work.
Boy, look, people pay for the kind of information that you were distributing out there, Ms. Powell. They pay dearly, okay? So, you mentioned one point about 120-day cycle. Is that a 120-day regeneration of the blood cell? Is that what?
Right.
Is that normal? That's normal.
That's normal, right? And the whole body. That's the beauty of it, and why food is so important, because every part of our body has a life cycle. Like our liver has a 180-day life cycle. Our bones, 4 to 7 years. The most outer layer of our skin, 30 days, as well as the outer layer of our gastrointestinal tract. So all of these things have a life cycle, naturally, a God-ordained life cycle. So when we eat, we're giving the reconstruction materials to our bodies to for that regenerative process. And so we're continually being renewed, and so we can make decisions that reconstruct the body in the best possible way.
So the normal sickle red blood cell does not live 120 days.
Right. It lasts 10 to 20 days.
10 to 20.
So you got to find something to increase that to the normal, like 120 days.
Well, it's hard to increase it, but you can compensate and the body's capacity to regenerate and build red blood cells, like eating dark leafy greens, because they actually have the same molecular structure as blood, except for in blood it's where the iron molecule is, it's magnesium in the body. So the beets are amazing for rebuilding blood. Chlorella, spirulina, wheatgrass, and other dark leafy greens are really beneficial for building blood.
So the thing about sickle cell disease,
sickle cell warriors who have had, who have had a lot of transfusions have to be careful about iron overload. There's a lot of iron in beets, but otherwise, that's a great blood builder also. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Pat.
So we really don't recommend people with sickle cell disease to try to increase their iron because of the rapid breakdown of red blood cells and the storing of iron in your body. Iron is one of those substances that your body does not readily rid itself of. And so using things to enhance iron in sickle cell disease only leads to iron overload. And if you get iron overload, you get iron in all your different organs, your brain, your kidneys, your liver, your heart, and they no longer function the way that they functioned before. And that can lead to death for people with sickle cell disease. Unfortunately, in sickle cell disease, people with sickle cell disease tend to break down things that they eat more rapidly. And so they look for things that are laced with sugar and stuff because it gives them additional energy and things. And so, as Shirley said, it's really, really important to balance your diet and eat those things that are more nutritious and avoid those things that are laced with iron and laced with sugar and laced with things that are not really helpful to you as a person with sickle cell disease. I know it gives you a burst of energy, but that energy doesn't last very long. And so what we try and do is teach individuals with sickle cell disease how to take care of themselves in a way that is purposeful. so that they have the best possible life and they live the longest possible life. You know, most individuals with sickle cell disease have been given these magical ages that they're going to die by, and the reality is you're going to live until you die. You know, and so we just try and teach people how to take good care of themselves, what things are good for your body, what things are not good for your body, and how mental health is so important, because if you're not feeling good about what's going on in life, you have no desire to continue living. And so a lot of people with sickle cell disease just give up because they can't do it any longer. So our focus is living a good and healthy life with sickle cell disease.
Okay, so we talked about the management of pain of sickle cell. Now, Ms. Powell, you haven't run across that in a while, right? Since you have the sickle cell, but you manage your pain quite well, or does it come up at all?
Well, I had 27 good years. From age 33 to 59. I'm 66 now. In the last 5-6 years, I've begun to have pain episodes again, and so I still continue to incorporate the diet and lifestyle principles into my life.
Right.
I think a lot of it has had to do with the tremendous amount of stress that that I've dealt with. So I've incorporated some new stress coping tools. But we've had these fires here. I could look out my bedroom window and see them. I've had this with the George Floyd and all the other things, the political things, just a whole boatload of, just a perfect storm. And stress is a major trigger for crises.
Oh, wow.
And so I've learned that I need to ramp up my stress management tools.
Wow, I'll tell you, this hour goes by so fast, man. This kind of information, I want to hold my head down sometimes, but this kind of like brings to a close our show, and we're certainly glad to have the three of you sending out this kind of information that hopefully our viewers. There are a lot of viewers who hesitate to send in comments because a lot of times you don't know what to say. You just want to sit back and listen. When yours kind of information, if it were me, I would just want to sit back and just listen to those three of you. So without saying anything, but there are websites to our viewers. The websites that Ms. Corley, Ms. Shapiro, and Ms. Powell can be reached on, and I think April put it up. You didn't? The websites. You're on mute, April.
You need to intro the websites, mention the websites, bring them into the conversation. And I'll bring them up on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to just add one last thing, and if it's okay, and talking about the Black Panther Party, because they were the ones in the 60s who launched sickle cell screening.
Wow. I didn't know that.
They had over a dozen free clinics, health clinics throughout the country. There's one that's still in existence, but there's been a lot of misinformation about the Black Panther Party. They gave free emergency rides because emergencies wouldn't come to marginalized communities, free food, free treatment, and so much more. They did the screening, the testing, and so they addressed a lot of challenges that the Black community have faced. They were advocates for equality. And so I think I'd like to, we don't have time to talk a lot about them, but there's so much misinformation about that party. from the media,
Right. Yeah.
and so much more. There's an article that appeared in the Time magazine in February of last year that I'd like to post a link to for our listeners who might be interested in knowing the true story about the Black Panthers, and particularly in relationship to the Black community and sickle cell disease.
Okay, if you put the link in the chat, then I will post it for everyone.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I just wanted to,
thank you.
sorry, just quickly, there are lots and lots going on in this country for the sickle cell community. And I am constantly shocked at how many times I run into someone a Black American who does not know anything about it. So what I'd hope for all the listeners to do is to share the fact that we've had this conversation with someone and tell them that we're living with sickle cell and we need their support. And as we are leading this battle for health equality, it's going to, we're talking about sickle cell, but really, we're talking about being Black in America and what that means when you go to the only place you can go to get health care. And that is a vital, important conversation. And we really need for everyone to be a part of it. So thank you.
Again, we thank all of you so much.
Thank you.
So you introduced 4 very important websites to us before the show began. And so I'm going to just bring them up on the screen. And if you will, either one of you can mention what the website is all about. And so let's start with the Cayenne Wellness.
Can you take it?
So I'm going to chime in on that one because that's organization that's near and dear to my heart. The person who runs that organization has sickle cell disease, and it was strategically put in place to make a difference in the community for people living with sickle cell disease. So Dr. Carolyn Raleigh is a woman who's a psychologist who has sickle cell disease. And she provides, she has gotten a number of fundings to provide services to people living with sickle cell disease in the state of California. And so her organization provides services throughout the state. They provide education, they provide emergency room services, where they go with patients to the emergency room. They provide support, mental health services. There are just a lot of things. And she also has a real interest in the dietary constraints when living with sickle cell disease. And so she is focused on that. And so that organization is very near and dear to my heart. But before we do the other 3, I also want us to remember that the National Institute of Health has information on sickle cell disease on their website. And I don't really know the website address off the top of my head, but they have that. And they also have research going on in sickle cell. And so I encourage you to visit the National Institute of Health's website in order to collect information as well.
The CDC also has information on sickle cell.
Awesome. Then we also have, I'm sorry. You were going to say about, you were.
Oh yeah. So I'm sorry. I was going to say, yeah. And there again, like I said, we've got things going on like we never thought we'd have. There's also the Cure Sickle Cell site, which is an initiative that's put together through the federal government that has representatives from every think tank, from every organization, Medi-Cal, Medicare, payer organizations, all working towards finding a cure for sickle cell and helping us with our charge for better care.
I'd just like to backtrack with Cayenne Wellness. As who I am the resident holistic health consultant for sickle cell community. But also you can find Dr. Rowley's book on holistic diet at that website.
So we'll talk about access advocacy, and what we really did. Our whole idea initially was really diving into the science and helping to get funding for stem cell research. And in my work with Pat and Carolyn, Dr. Carolyn, I became aware of just how difficult it was for adults living with sickle cell to get treatment. I was kind of in a bubble with my daughter because she got always excellent care. And so we advocate and we train advocates to help at the point of care, meaning the doctor's office, the ER, once you're on the floor, because my thought or our thought and belief is it won't do you any good to have a cure if you're so sick that you aren't what we coined as or think of as cure worthy. And so we have we appear everywhere. We're all through the country. We work very closely with Cayenne and the other organizations here in California. Again, use our voice. The other one here, Sickle. Sickle was started by Marcus and Valentine. This is a brother and sister. When I met them, they reminded me so much of growing up with my brother. Marcus unfortunately passed a year ago. Sickle is leading us with learning how to actually work with legislators and payers. My mom just thought she had to pay my brother's doctor bill. She never thought about having to lobby in front of Congress or go to a Medicaid or Medicare meeting. And so they're leading us and training the young people to take over so that Pat and I can really retire. We keep saying we're going to retire.
Yeah.
So check out their site. They're very, very transparent, and everything they're doing is posted there. Their belief is, we all need to be educated and share the information.
Okay. All right.
Excellent information tonight, ladies. Really, it's a lot to take in an hour, like Brother Edward said. But at least there is rebroadcast because we are, of course, on YouTube, and you can catch it at least for the next week on our WCMagazine.net website. Capture the link and share it. This is information that everyone can use because you never know. What we don't know is we probably know someone with sickle cell who doesn't know they have sickle cell.
Right.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
And
I also want to say there are community-based organizations all over the country. So wherever you live, look around because there's probably an organization in your area that can help you or help your family member who has sickle cell disease.
And if not, reach out to one of the other or the larger organizations, and we will help.
Wow.
So
fantastic, fantastic. Next time we're gonna have an admission feature. When we have you all on again, we may have you all on again. Of course, that's kind of derogatory to say that because you really should give medicine, kind of freely, like medical information anyway. But
well, thank you guys so much for inviting us. It's been an amazing evening spending time with you.
Well, you all have been amazing guests. Trust me.
We definitely thoroughly appreciate it. And for those of you who did not hear the intros in the beginning, these ladies are on the West Coast. They're in LA and LA area. And so it's great that they're able to spend time with us, especially with the time difference. And so we appreciate your time tonight, and just keep fighting the good fight and doing what you do.
Absolutely. And
thank you so much.
Yeah. And I know you're doing a good job. So I just know that.
I just put two links to the legislation regarding sickle cell that's before Congress.
Yes.
And so you can participate and reach out to your local Congress person to advocate for the passage of these bills.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, again, I see Ms. Corley waving us. I want to say thank you, Ms. Corley, and Ms. Powell and Ms. Shapiro. Thank you all, and to our viewers, thank you all for listening today. And certainly we're glad. We're just so glad. And humble.
We're going to let them exit for a moment, and we'll talk about what we're going to have on the show next week. So, ladies, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care. You're welcome. All right, Brother Edward. So, great show tonight, and I just want to let our viewers know that next week we will have our special guest who will be talking about this month's domestic violence awareness campaign. October, wow, we're almost out of October, but October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And we have a very special guest who's going to be with us. And actually, she's bringing along a few people with her to talk about the efforts to bring more attention to domestic violence and how it affects so many people in so many families. And so, we want to advise that the information that will be shared will be sensitive in nature. We will have a special guest who will share their lived experience, which means that they will talk about the situation that they had as it relates to domestic violence. And then we'll also talk about the fact that it actually affects populations that we typically do not associate with domestic violence. It affects men, it affects children. And most of the time, domestic violence is attached to things that happen to women only, and that's certainly not the truth. And so we have our special guest, Gwen Thomason, here, and she's an advocate doing special things in the community, and has an annual event called Ebony's Hope that is coming up real soon, and in tribute to her late sister who was a victim of domestic violence. And so we ask that you all tune in. And once again, some of the content will be sensitive in nature because they will be sharing their special stories. And but we want you to let everyone know that they should tune in because, again, just like with the information about sickle cell, you just never know who is sitting to your left or your right who may be impacted by domestic violence. And so you may glean some important information that could help someone and even possibly save a life. So just want to put that out there, Brother Edward, for October.
Well, next week is going to be very interesting.
It is.
Mm-hmm. It is going to be very interesting. That is an issue that needs to be addressed all the time. I'll use the word. Okay. And you don't get the feeling until you hear it from victims themselves. Mm-hmm. Okay. Or someone who has a close relative as a victim and has seen it thoroughly. So, but anyway.
Absolutely. And we're working on some great shows for November as well. We'll make another announcement of what's to come at the beginning of November. And if you have a topic that you'd like for us to explore or you're doing something special in the community and think that it's something that's as they say, news that you can use in the community, be in touch with us and we can talk to you about the possibility of appearing on the show. So, Brother Edward,
absolutely.
It's been great tonight. Thank you so much for bringing those guests on, and we certainly do appreciate them taking their time out all the way from the West Coast to be with us here on Eastern Standard Time. Therefore,
Eastern Standard Time.
Yes. So we really do appreciate it.
Around 5:30 there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you all for tuning in and for watching tonight, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Be on the lookout for the promotional flyer for next week's show, and have a great week. God bless.
And don't forget the latest edition of the magazine is posted on our website. Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right.
And it's depicting is this National Breast Cancer Month? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So check it out. Mm-hmm. See you next week.
All right.
God bless. Good speed.
Thank you for watching the World Community Magazine's Hour of Power Live on Facebook with your host Edward McQueen and April Garner.